for coming out. Okay, now with my official. So my name is Orly Ravid, and I founded the Film Collaborative, and I also run the Entertainment and the Arts Law Clinic at Southwestern Law School. Maybe I'll touch on this for a second later, but these represent free legal services. I feel like I buried the lead by not putting that on the flyer, but I just want you to know that. Okay, so it's my pleasure to welcome you to Solidarity House. This panel is How Policy Will Shape the Future of Independent Film. Solidarity House, which is both a space and a practice, creating meaningful alignment where imagination meets infrastructure, and solidarity becomes strategy. This gathering is designed to strengthen our collective capacity to imagine and build the future of independent storytelling and co-design pathways toward a more sustainable and equitable creative future that centers repair, liberation, and sovereignty. Live captioning for this session is available through Coda, a web-based tool accessible on your device. It doesn't require any account or logins, and our unique links are available via the QR codes posted around the room and on our website, thesolidarity.house.com/schedule. Our next activation is titled, How Policy Will Shape the Future of Independent Film. We're grateful to have the following folks joining us. Donald Young with the Center for Asian American Media. Don Porter, woo, yes. Don Porter with Trilogy Films. Jack Deluca with Future Film Coalition. And Loira Limbal with Firelight Media. You already gave a warm welcome to our panelists, so I don't have to repeat that. But, I just have to say, if you haven't seen When a Witness Recants, it's extraordinary. And I just want to thank you for making that. It's here at the festival, that's why I'm mentioning it. So just before we get into the questions and stuff, could we just all just give like another few words about yourselves and what you're doing in this moment in this space? So Jack, starting with you, and then we'll go down.
All right. Hi, my name is Jax. I'm the interim executive director of Future Film Coalition, which is an organization that will be working to advocate for the rights of you as independent filmmakers and ensuring that people have access to that for generations to come. In addition to that, I'm also a research fellow at the Harvard Shorenstein Center as a documentary and the public interest fellow, and I'm developing a new blueprint for public media with the public.
Amazing. Don.
I'm Don Young, Executive Director of CAM. We were defunded in July through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting Rights. So what are we doing now? We didn't lay anybody off. We are re-envisioning our strategic plan to figure out how you use a long-standing organization's history to support community at a way you haven't before. You look through pathways of opportunities that are going to emerge. It's important in this conversation, things are going to reemerge, and we need to start to prepare ourselves and change our practices, and then how we as leaders and members of community can sort of project what people need so we can prep, that we can give back and serve properly. These next 2 years, it's going to look up, and that's our job to prepare ourselves that this turn will happen.
Amazing. Yes, and we're going to talk more about that. Dawn.
I'm Dawn Porter. I'm a filmmaker. We have our documentary, thank you, Orly, When a Witness Recants, which premieres Tuesday, but will be on HBO. So it already has distribution. Like, thank you, HBO. But I want to mention, in addition to my own work on my own films, I produce other people's films. I also have been a governor at the Television Academy. I work with the Academy. So we need people both in rooms and pushing on the outside to make sure that we're communicating and telling and sharing information so that we can productively move our industry forward. So I'm very excited to be with you and hear more about what you all are doing.
Thank you.
I'm Loira Limbal. I'm the president and CEO of Firelight Media. I'm also a filmmaker myself, and like Don and Cam, we also had our funding severely cut by the defunding of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. But we are very clear about what our job is, which is support documentary filmmakers of color, and so we quickly reorganized ourselves to launch a new fund, which is called the Firelight Fund, meant to support filmmakers of color telling the stories of the communities that are most directly impacted by this current administration's policies at this moment, to get that money out quickly and as smoothly as possible, because we don't believe that the uncertainty in the funding and distribution landscape should stifle creativity and new work. We actually think it should foster artistic growth and new forms of solidarity. So that's what we do. We also have, so we have grants, we have fellowships, we do commission short films from filmmakers of color, and we do co-productions.
Awesome. We're going to talk about what the future looks like, but for just in terms of the present, you guys have already started to touch on this, but Loira and Don, I'm just, aside from just like the fact of the funding cut, what is happening in the space that's impacting filmmakers in terms of just, anything else in terms of the documentary space, in terms of the policy shifts? What are you seeing beyond just, yes, we have less money? So I'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Orly. We all see
where to start?
We all watch the news, right? But I will say that for the filmmakers we support, what is happening are not things that they're watching on the news. They are things that they are living. We have had fellows who have been placed on the death list of the Social Security office by the administration to effectively kill immigrants on paper so that they cannot conduct, everyday activities. And the idea behind that strategy of the administration was to get people to self-deport. So we've had fellows, in the midst of retreats of ours, discover that they are on this Social Security death list, and they are very much alive. We have fellows that are no longer traveling. They are afraid to get on planes for fear of being detained. We have, all sorts of things going on. So again, for the filmmakers we support, the brutality of this administration is not sort of a conceptual thing that is happening around them. It is what they're living. And then you add on top of that they are also trying to tell the stories of these communities, right? So there's this sort of double, triple jeopardy that we are existing in. So I would say that on beyond sort of funding and financing conversations. In terms of that, the funding and financing, a couple of things, as most of you all know, PBS, public media, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has been targeted by this administration. And public media, quiet as it's kept, has been the largest funder and distributor of independent documentary films in the United States for decades. That's not a story that we know. Often people, will say, we support filmmakers, right? Young filmmakers will say, I'm making a documentary, but I'm not making a PBS documentary. I'm making a Sundance documentary. And then we have to tell them, hey, that film that premiered at Sundance that you love so much, that is going to premiere on PBS, or it was supported by public media. In fact, we, Firelight, have 2 films that we supported that are premiering in the festival. Encourage everyone to go out and watch them. American Pachuco came through one of our co-production programs. And Aniku Bijigan, which is premiering on Monday, went through our documentary lab program. So these are Sundance films that are also public media films, and there are many more like them. And public media, not perfect, not without flaws, but it has been the space where there has been room for several of us at the same time. Toni Morrison in the 70s talked about how the market only had space for one Black author at a time. I think the same is true of the commercial space today in the United States. So public media has been the space where a few of us could be there at the same time. And so we've worked, very closely. So the impact of the defunding, right, is huge. Not only because there's diminished funds that can go out to filmmakers, diminished opportunities for distribution, but also for the organizations like ours that support filmmakers, they supported us, right? So there's this sort of very broad ripple effect. And then the last thing that I'll say around policies is that this administration is also targeting private philanthropy. It is targeting nonprofits, DEI work. All of us in this room, we are all on the list of things that can't exist or be supported. And they are persecuting folks and going after people, including corporations as well. And what that looks like in real life is board members of foundations or board members of corporations getting threats and receiving letters. So this administration has weaponized so many different agencies, and they've been so comprehensive in the attack, right, that they have in many ways corralled us. So those are some of the impacts that we're seeing.
Thank you. Don, is there something you wanted to add?
I can't add a lot in terms of what the filmmakers are going through. I think in terms of what the organizations are trying to do, what the field's trying to do is the numbers are going to bear out that the storytelling will continue, right? I think in terms of the momentum of this moment is a very clear backlash towards effective storytelling, right? I mean, I think it's important to frame that this is the work that's being done by this administration. It's not going to be permanent. Like that can't bear out. That being said, it's important to acknowledge, an organization like ADOC is 2,000 members, right? So the scope of those who have been negatively affected is astounding, right? But I believe that amongst the leadership, I mean, somebody's been doing it for 30 years. What happened in 2025 is horrific, but I don't want to return to 30 years ago, right? But I take some lessons in terms of, AIVF, Film Arts Foundation, there was some very rigorous, thoughtful, filmmaker-led creations that I feel like there's something different. It can't be the same construct in the past that filmmakers build it. I think there's an infrastructure question and policy question that in the ways that filmmakers need more producers, filmmakers need more policy and advocacy structures. So I believe that there's real opportunities, ripe opportunities that Future of Film and others ideate that there's and everybody, when we're on the streets, right, like everybody's checking in with each other. Leaders want to support each other, but we got to move quickly, we got to move efficiently, and we got to tell a better story about what film does. And I think there's this notion in the defunding of CPB, they didn't want to talk about diversity or independence. But I think it's clear that if documentary film was eliminated, culture would be greatly diminished. But this notion of defining what documentary film and filmmakers provide, I think we've got some work to do in that space.
And I mean, you mentioned policy, so I guess, Jax, I want to go to you. And just in terms of like policy around relying on federal fund, just policies of organizations relying on federal funding, and just what kind of policy work are you looking at?
Gosh, there is so much.
In 10 seconds or less. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, so one thing I didn't say in my introduction is I worked at the National Endowment for the Arts. I was there for close to a decade as the Film and Media Arts Director. We were a Doge casualty, and I didn't have a job. And part of what my job entailed in those last few months that I was there was enforcing those executive orders. And I will say, people who are in government don't want to be doing that. And we're trying to find ways around how do we do that without getting also in trouble, right? And I think what was so different about this time versus 2016, because it happened then, but it just wasn't the same way, we couldn't do it the same way because it was so thorough, right? Because they had Doge and all of these things were happening. But one thing that keeps coming to my mind is how do we educate organizations who were getting government funding and other people to work around in the structures to still get the money from the government. And I know some people are like, we don't want money from the government right now, but also that government is your taxpayer dollars. And you are part of this system. And we are we are the people who make up this country. So that money belongs to you. So the thing I'm thinking about in terms of policy is how do you work with policymakers and other people who do, in the end, want to get and support and do the things that can protect their constituents and come to that shared language where you can create solutions and an understanding of what types of protections are needed and what types of adjustments might be needed. So that way we can get to the end goal, which is supporting these communities in different ways. I know one thing that kept coming up for us is with the executive orders around diversity, equity, and inclusion. What was so horrible about that is all previous to that in the Biden administration, the questions on the grant applications at the National Endowment for the Arts were like, tell us how you're reaching diverse audiences. How are you doing this type of representation in your work? So every application was flagged. And we did not have much time to fight back as program directors in there. And one of the things that we kept repeating over and over again is this is not a DEI program that is propagating DEI mentality of how the DEI executive order was. This is called diverse representation of audiences. All of the projects that the NEA had, well, most of them coming in, it was still serving all audiences, right? So the thing is that I'm like trying to hammer home is because something's about diversity, equity, and inclusion doesn't mean, diversity, equity, and inclusion, not exclusion, does not mean it's excluding people. So the work that we're doing is still able to be supported if we're really explicit about that. And I know that is that something that you've experienced too with CAM?
Yeah. The Friday before our festival started, we lost our NEA, right? And we were told it's because you have to be, the grant is around economic development for Asian Americans. And we were joking, how do you know our festival loses money, right? It's like, but it's like, it's also, we talked about it before, there's, the language is changing, right? We all, diversity, equity, and inclusion can become innovation.
Right,
Yes.
right.
And, we all have these moral lines that we have to begin to think through. For CAM, we're not trying to recover the CPB support as it was, but we believe as a federally that our communities deserve our taxpayer dollars. Mm-hmm. How that plays out over time, so be it, right? But if we're seen as like not worthy of the tax dollars that we all pay, like as an organization, as a community group, that's just what we want to advocate for.
Exactly.
And there's other areas, right? But that's not what, we also have to learn, our communities need to step up to support us. And we're working very hard to make sure we don't want to be in this place again. And our community, our filmmakers don't deserve that.
Well, and I was going to say, I'm going to go ahead, please.
One of the things that I wanted to point out, I think because there was such a fire hose onslaught of aggression towards, and even how we have adapted to the idea that DEI is somehow bad and we're trying to avoid it. I'm like, what the fuck? That is crazy. Like, what is bad about diversity? What is bad about inclusion, right? So I think everything came so quickly, and there in even ways we need to have these spaces. I'm very happy to have these spaces. One of the things that I have done in the past is work with the USC. It is a cultural arts exchange where they send filmmakers to other countries. So I've been to Bangladesh. I have been to other places. I was scheduled to go to talk about how film can help improve women's rights, right? How film can lead to legislation. I had done a project about Title IX. And so I get from Marco Rubio's department that the support for women's rights is not aligned with this administration's agenda, and so they canceled the trip. And so I think, and I wasn't even thinking about like all of the different ways that, this administration, this president, we should name them. There's Marco Rubio, that they are specifically trying to stifle the culture. And I think something Dawn just said is really important. If we weren't successful, they wouldn't be targeting us. Right. And so starting from the power of strength, like we are strong. And so that's why we're in the crosshairs, and they're doing everything they can as quickly as they can before they get stopped. And so like now kind of get off the back foot and be more aggressive, which is why it's very important, Jax, what your initiatives are doing.
Yeah, Future Film Coalition, one of the things that we're also taking on as an issue, and I'll talk about blockthemerger.com in a little bit, but one of the other issues we're doing in this year is thinking about cultural levies and other types of community initiatives. And in Colorado, there was a group of counties that got together, and it was during funding cuts for the arts and culture. And these communities were able to vote in on a ballot a 1% for the arts type of an initiative. And right now it distributes, it's like the second largest arts funding that gets distributed in the United States. But just for this cluster of counties in Colorado. That's something that any community can do. And if you're in one of these communities that you feel like you can get your community to rally behind you to pass a cultural levy or a cultural tax, those are the types of things right now that can help places like CAM and Firelight do the work, because it's like that money can go back into the organizations, and these local and regional types of policy interventions are where it's at, because federal is going to be so hard, but we need to get organized for 2030. Right. We need to do the low-hanging fruit, focus on 2030 and beyond of how do we do this and not be fragmented and work together with coordinated messaging. And that's what Future Film Coalition will be doing. And so we hope that, like, if there's one thing that you could do today, it is sign up for our Substack, check out blockthemerger.com and kind of get involved, but we'll talk more about that. But I was just wanted to plug that.
The thoughtlessness of the administration has to be emphasized, because even scientists had to remove biodiversity from their applications.
Totally.
I mean, it's like and it's just like AI scraping.
The word environment.
It's just like so stupid.
Yeah. So crazy.
But I also want to hear from you guys talking about coordination as well, because we spoke before the panel about, film collaborators called collaborative for, the efficiencies that can be created and the power that can be created by collaborating and having information that is useful, sort of reach everybody and be acted on in an efficient way. So I'm curious if that speaks to you, or anything that you want to say in terms of Firelight, interacting with all this stuff.
I mean, the thing that comes to mind when you mention that is that we are at Solidarity House. This is beautiful. And somehow some of us are acting as if solidarity is a new concept, right, and it isn't what we've been doing all along. The many filmmakers of color who have careers, the many beautiful films that we have by these filmmakers have only been possible because we have been working with each other in coordinated ways, in solidarity with each other. We have made this work. We have built the power that we've built, the cultural power that we've built, that has made us a target, not because of the systems. We've done it despite the systems, and we've done it together.
Mm-hmm. So, Dawn, you're a filmmaker, obviously, and I know HBO funded your film that's here. I'm just curious if you have other tips or visions around fundraising that it doesn't look for federal funding, but something else, corporate, philanthropic. Any thoughts around that?
I think that we're, as filmmakers, we have to do something we don't like to do, which is realize that we are responsible for our own success. And we are responsible. We can't just sit and wait for someone to discover how magical we are. We have to make the case for our work. And it is difficult, it is embarrassing, it is annoying, but it is necessary. So I'm happy that over the years I've worked to cultivate relationships with philanthropies. I think, but the philanthropies need to be educated, and they are doing this work. Lauren at MacArthur is, but filmmakers need to reach out to them. So about 10 years ago, MacArthur used to give individual grants to filmmakers, not to entities. I think they should do all the things, but they also used to give to individuals. And they stopped. And when they stopped, I called her up and I said, well, this is terrible, and you must be like flooded. And she said, nobody has called me. Nobody complained. If we're not complaining, yes, they don't know that it's a problem. So it's you can be productive and constructive in saying, this is how this is affecting me. So one of the things I know MacArthur is doing is they are speaking to other philanthropic organizations and saying, many of us have been talking about, they need to step up, because I'm worried about myself all the time, but I'm more worried about the people who are 10 years, 20 years younger, because I can't tell them to come into this situation now when they're saying, well, how do I fund it? Mm-hmm. And I don't have good answers. So I think educating the philanthropy, if you have the opportunity to talk about what it means to your work and how it keeps you going, and be honest. Sometimes we're all being TikTok fabulous, and we're not so fabulous. And so, like, everyone's hurting. You know, people come up to me and they're like, "How you're so?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like every other week, I'm like, "Can I keep this going? Can I keep doing this with the people I like in the ethical way that I want? Because I don't just want to make films with anybody. I want to make films with people who treat my subjects with the care and respect that they deserve. That's not just anybody. That's years of working with people and knowing that I can trust them." So I think talking to people, telling the truth about how you're doing. Yeah. You can do it without crying and whining. You can say, "This is really hard because if I don't get this next $10,000, I can't shoot. If I can't shoot, I can't make this deadline." You have to be really specific. And don't assume that people know what you're going through. They do not. And you acting like life is fabulous and everything's fine, that's not helping. So I think being really honest, and I'm honest with all my friends, you know, when we have the time. And the last thing I will say is we all are dealing with a lot, not just keeping our own selves safe, but watching the media, watching people get gunned down in the streets. And you feel like, should I be here at a fancy festival doing that? And you know what? You should. And you know why? Because we are talking to each other. We are seeing this beautiful art, and we're going to go live to fight another day. Because it does matter. It's not just selfish. The stories that we tell are actually contributing to our collective society and making it better and not just standing for people.
Amen to that. Does any one of you want to add to anything that's been said so far on that thread?
Yeah, I love what you say about reaching out to MacArthur and philanthropy and letting them know what's happening. And the reason why Future Film Coalition exists is because we know that policymakers don't understand this field. It is a very complicated field to describe in 5 minutes if you have that with a policymaker, because they have a lot of assumptions of what it means to make a film. They have a lot of assumptions of how they think the marketplace works. But the reality is, this industry is built up of small businesses and communities and people who are local businesses and entrepreneurs, and it's really hard for you to do your work. And you're part of that supply chain for the media and entertainment industry. And the people in the entertainment industry have lobbyists. This industry does not have lobbyists, the independent films. So this is the role that Future Film Coalition is also going to be filling that gap. So that way we can translate what's happening on the ground. So that way when policymakers are looking at the marketplace and seeing where the imbalances are, they can come to us for information and we can speak on behalf of the field. And I have the privilege, because I'm not a filmmaker, I have the privilege to be saying the things that a lot of you might be afraid to say. And so with blockthemerger.com, as we know, with the Warner Brothers Discovery and Netflix and Paramount, we have people who do work with Netflix. So I know that you don't want your name on your story about how you might have been affected by media consolidation. Or we know a lot of you don't want to be speaking out against how Netflix maybe have controlled the budget to your film or made it so that you couldn't distribute your film in the places that you did. Or maybe they took all the rights to your film. So that's a loss of long-term revenue for you. People who are antitrust regulators, they want your stories because they want to know this. So that way, when they are reviewing the merger, they can say, oh, okay, this is how you're harmed by this, because we haven't heard this before. It's so interesting because they are like, oh, we never heard this. We never knew that art house cinemas need access to repertory films in order to get people coming in to pay tickets, and that's a great source of revenue for us. So all of this is
and
data.
How communities are so well served, right? Communities in the Midwest.
Exactly.
I was just talking to someone who runs a festival in the Midwest, how they want and need this stuff.
Yes,
You know,
and so submitting these stories. So on the back of these cards, just so people know, you can submit your stories and it's anonymous and confidential. And we'll be using that to aggregate and identify patterns. So that way, when a merger is in review, they can come to this field, the independent film field, not the entertainment industry.
You know, Jax, what you're talking about us not really having lobbying. I shout out Dominic being here from IDA, and we, you know, so recently. There was, I'm on like a lot of listservs, and there was like, oh, tax credits in New York for entertainment. And I said to my production person, can we get that? And then quickly the answer was no, it doesn't apply to documentaries. And I'm like, that is crazy. When we did Eyes on the Prize, we employed 100 people, a lot of them in New York City. why don't I qualify with a
Exactly.
multi-million-dollar project
That's right,
for
yeah.
a tax credit that's actually going right back into my community? I'm using post here. I'm using cinematographers. I'm using PAs.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want that 30%.
That's
Why
the
does
next thing.
Netflix get that?
We'll
No
be
offense,
working on
Netflix.
that.
I love you, but
Totally. I was just at the
That's
Film
right.
Commissioner's house, and Film USA, we will be working with them to help do that. And after they did like a really lovely shout out to Future Film Coalition, which was amazing. And after that, all these film commissioners were coming over and being like, hey, in our area, people are trying to throw our tax incentives under the bus because they think it's just supporting studios. They think it's just supporting Netflix. Can you help us make the case? And I'm like, yes, I can. All you need to do is support documentaries. Make sure you have
That's right.
quotas for
Right.
local production support. So
and
they
that's what
want to
it's
do this
actually
for you
for.
too.
It's for locally
Exactly.
based
Right,
people
right,
who
right.
need that
It's
resource to
communication,
keep
too.
going.
We need to say it.
Yeah, and it's also building alignments. How many films have had like celebrity actors? That should have been alignment with SAG, for example, right? So there's a lot of kind of situating that's important, right? Cultural districts, right? I think cultural districts is a real opportunity on a local level. You can't do DEI, but nobody will defund a cultural district.
And even celebrities who are
Right.
EPs on docs, right? Like that's an interesting.
Absolutely, right? So,
You know, one other thing is IDA cannot do it. They're not just doing it by themselves. We need to join. You need to pay your fees so that they can do their work. Jax, you need to join. And I know we're all like, oh, I can't do another thing. You gotta. You just gotta. Like, do you want to do this work? Then you gotta actually do your part.
And
Well-
Laura's gonna. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say on the you have to do your part. I think, again, going back to this topic of solidarity, there's a lot of conversation about coordinating and being more efficient and being more generous and all these things that are very important. And I also think that we need to be talking about risk and having honest conversations about what risks we're willing to take. The reality is that we've been in the documentary space, we've been having conversations about sustainability. We are in a climate where I think the conversation needs to shift from sustainability to continuity. We may not be able to continue to do this work, not just because the money's disappearing. This is not just an industry conversation. The political moment that we're living in is going to require that we have a lot of clarity of purpose and that we do a sort of reflection, be very honest with ourselves and ask ourselves, what risks am I willing to take? It's going to require some risk. This is not going to be just sort of comfortable, sign the petition kind of party. Like that bus has left the station a long time ago. The second person was murdered in Minneapolis, an ICU nurse, Alex Petri. Like this is where we are. So I think it's important, right? Because I know many of us must feel the dissonance in our bodies of being here at the Fancy Film Festival. I think the best that we can do is to have, the real conversations in these spaces. Being together in person is so valuable. But I think we need to go a couple layers deeper in what we're talking about and have the more uncomfortable conversations. We are in a situation where we're used to, if it's not on the gram, it didn't happen, where sort of everything we do is hyper visible. We might have to be a little more subversive, a little more subterranean. Everything should not be known, right? We might have to be providing cover. You might have a privilege that I don't have, but you can extend that privilege to me. I may be able to provide cover for someone else. As individuals, as filmmakers, that's a responsibility. We're going to have to be
information sharing.
We're going to have to be
Right.
responsible for and to each other, but also as organizations, right? So I think these are some of the other conversations for me that feel really important to ground the conversation in the current moment, so it doesn't feel like we're talking like the things that are currently happening are not happening.
Absolutely. And Dawn, I just want to give you a second to emphasize the joining, right? The like, I'm guilty of being asked to work with with your organization and being afraid I couldn't handle the commitment, but I have to step up and do that. And also the transparency, right? We all have to share information, resources, and create efficiencies and effective. Right? You were just what you were
I
just saying,
think
yeah.
the information sharing is really important. So maybe I can't go to 5 meetings, but if I know it's happening, maybe there are people who can go, so that we're spreading. Because I think in our industry, a lot of times we ask a lot of a few people.
Right.
Right. And then we just wait for them to solve it, and then we'll be happy. And I think we need to figure out, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but that's why we're here in conversation, is how do we share the burden of what we need to do for our collective safety and progress.
And I actually have one small idea about that, and then I want to turn to 2030 because I know you guys want to talk about that. It's just like to have, you know, I think it's for the folks who are doing that work to sort of create a system around. It's almost like blockchain, right? But it's like we're going to decentralize certain tasks, but then re-centralize them for, you know, to create that efficiency. I think it really is doable, but we have to like get together and work through it.
Yeah, and I think it's also everybody. What I've observed is everybody, like, there's an alignment and like community sees each other in a way that we didn't years ago. I mean, they're like, I think you would hear the question of scarcity, you know, that there was a kind of holding stuff in. So I think there's an openness, but like, you know, Project 2025 was a plan. It was a coordinated strategy. And it's been very effective because there was a blueprint. And I think there's so many touch points of whether it's Getting Real, Sundance. There's got to be a way in which this is like it shouldn't be a separated conversation, but we're working towards it. I mean,
Well, what does that look like? What does that look like for 2030?
We want policy change. We want to figure out, you know, like yesterday, there was this great meeting of like Asian American film festivals, right? So in that small space, a big space, but it's a small space, we're talking about like, how do we share programming strategies? How we jointly pitch to filmmakers? Mm-hmm. What I got excited about was like people were saying, I want to figure out how to do a donor event so I can build my capacity. Mm-hmm. That's something we can do, right? Like that's something, I think there's questions of capacity and what is sort of right sizing for what folks can do. But it's also creating this priority of like, this is what we need. We need policies. What is common for, you know, it took me 30 years to figure out, like, why would you jump into this industry that's like, there was this best quote from a filmmaker. They got a MacArthur Award when they were funding film. And his mother was upset at him. She's like, you got a $100,000 grant when you could have bought a home, right? So there's something about this scale of risk and the narrative of like, we got to embrace like making a more sustainable approach and support emerging filmmakers to learn how to fundraise. And we got to educate our communities that they have to invest in our community or else their stories won't be told, right? I mean,
I really like this idea of a blueprint, Don. I think that's really, because something concrete to focus on that can be crowdsourced and people can, you know, get to enough agreement on what the top priorities
and what they
are.
pitch in.
Because we're right now we're all doing different things, and it's hard to get organized. So.
I think, you know, to bring in the 2030 and looking ahead, I think that this is a moment, right, where we're having sort of broad-scale systems collapse. And when we talk about public and public infrastructure, public goods, I feel like our imagination is currently held captive by corporate Democrats and Republicans who tell us that what they're doing is the most or the best that they can do. We pay a lot of taxes. We have one of the highest tax rates around the world, and we get virtually nothing in return for that, right? And there are plenty of democratic countries across the world where the citizens receive a lot more expansive and better quality public goods and public services. So there's models, it's possible, but I do think that we have to become much more radical in our imagination around what public even is and what that can look like. Even, you don't even have to look outside of the country. There have been moments in US history where there was completely tuition-free university, for example. City College was completely free for about 100 years. It ended in 1976.
That's where my mom went to school, and it was great. It was
Right.
great college.
Like completely tuition-free. There were land-grant colleges that were completely tuition-free. Alaska has had a basic income for I don't know how long, since the 70s, right? Like there are these things that we're told are not possible, but they have already happened in history, are currently happening in some places in the US, and plenty of examples outside of the US. So I think we also have to kind of move beyond, as we talk about policy work and the public and public goods, being a lot more radical, you know, moving past what sort of the blue-red conversation that we're having in the United States, because it's mediocre at best.
And yes, and in terms of, I mean, for the like Jackson, Dawn, are you guys thinking about like what happens in 2030 in terms of administration? Is there a contingency plan if this then that, or is that just like not what's happening?
I don't think it's an if this then that. I think what can I say? So, one thing
you can edit it later.
Well, okay. So right now, I'm a fellow at the Shorenstein Center. I'm developing this blueprint for public media. One of the thing though is I just use the word I. That's not what it's. I would like to be shepherding this with the public. And when we're talking about the public, it is framing it around the public good and what that means beyond red and blue and how people work together. My father, who I said this on the last panel, Trump voter, terrible. My family, all of them. And they don't understand the value of what it means to support arts or support public media. It is a hard term for them. They're like, well, we don't need that. It's super biased, right? This opens up very interesting conversations because when I tell them what public media has done and what it does, and when I talk about what just, I don't know, the things that he would care about, he's like, oh, wait, I do like that. Oh, wait, I do think we should pay for that in our taxes. Oh, I do think we should have this. Oh, I didn't know when you worked at Squeaky Whale in Buffalo that you would have been affected by these things. Or, oh, right. Storytelling, that is all things that are part of us talking about our story as people who live here and the challenges and the issues that we as people are encountering. It's just like part of our basic humanity. My dad is a reasonable person. I have no idea. He would have voted for Bernie. So this is like the crazy thing to me that it just crushes me. But instead of like not talking to them, I've opened up these conversations, and I feel very optimistic that if we can just get at the baseline of having these like very open conversations about just basic needs and people, because people at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who care about people, and that's the thing that like when we're working in the arts and thinking about films and storytelling, that that is like kind of the core of it. And I came from that like democratic access to storytelling and that, but that means everybody. That doesn't mean just certain people get to do this. So that's
and
the
working
things
on
that
the
I'm thinking
individual
about.
level. I mean, I can't help but remember when Biden said that if it weren't for Will and Grace, gay marriage wouldn't have passed. So it's also like hearing you talk, say, cross to a people who think differently from you, but make them see, like helping them see, right? Not make them, helping them see things in a different way.
So now I remember what I was saying about the blueprint, though. The blueprint needs to have core pillars, and that blueprint also needs to have something for everybody in there. There's not going to be a one-size-fits-all for any type of blueprint, but we need to make sure that there is something that we all agree on as core principles for a humane and civic way of living that is not built on shooting people in the street. So I just feel like there's that that we can, I think a lot of us who have been fragmented can agree on.
Yes. and I Dawn, did you want to? Yeah. Sorry, every time I say Dawn and Dawn, it may not be clear what I'm saying.
I will always defer, Dawn.
So will I.
I'll wait for Dawn.
Yeah, go ahead with just what you're thinking about in terms of administration outcomes.
Look, just this week in the public media space, and again, our goal is not to revive. Ready to Learn was returned. $30 million Ready to Learn was for children's programming, right? Congress quietly did that. They're going back, right? And then safety has been returned at like 40 million. Something's coming back. Again,
Science grants have been returned.
Exactly. So I think, all I could say is we're viewing this as building blocks, right? So like, whatever. I know there's a report about $50 million or so has been taken from the field. So we're looking at, can we revive 5 here or 2 here, and I think, well, Loira, I'm much more of a pragmatist, right? Loira's, like, we kind of do this, we join, we're sort of joined at the hip because we sort of, our time's been similar, right? But she's always like, like, I'm like, no, we could build this back. And then Laura's like, come on now, right? And I'm learning to embrace that, right? So, but I think the merger. So there's you want to block the merger. Totally support that. There are precedents when Comcast NBC merger happened. tens of $million politically were given back to certain communities that filmmakers were not a part of, NAACP, other civil. So that's what I'm interested in. So what that'll look like, I don't know. But politically, I want to make sure that we begin to stage this.
I think if there's any, I almost hesitate to say bright side to where we are now, because it is all very, very dark, is maybe we have the opportunity to do it better. Maybe we can just say, hey, all the things that we as filmmakers have complained about for so long, only certain people get X, only blah, blah, blah. Maybe we can just do it better. And maybe this blueprint is the like you're doing the public media, but we need a film blueprint, and we need to stop like being mad at each other for like some people get resourced and some people don't. Like everybody's got something they need. And so maybe just the collective imagination of how do we want it to be instead of just wallowing in how terrible it is.
And that's going to come up when I do the closing statement for this session. But with that, I'm going to ask one last thing of you all, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A from all of you. So basically, I want you to say something that you want to say before we open it up to Q&A. And if that happens to relate to just also looking to corporations to be more supportive in this time, feel free to chime in on that. And I'll just start from the end and go down. Jax.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, or you want me to...
No, I'll start. This is good. Okay. One thing that I haven't said about blockthemerger.com is, so you could share your story, but also you can put your name on here to support this work, and by doing that, you are standing up for audiences, industry workers, and communities who are part of all of this. And by putting your name on there, and people are starting to do it, you can put your logo on there. That's just part of a movement that we'd like to be building. And in the stories that we're collecting, we're also would love to hear like what are the things you want to see, because as Dawn mentioned, we can get carve-outs. If this is not successful in blocking a merger, there could be money that can get routed back to the independent film community, because they'll have a better understanding of what types of harms media consolidation has done on this sector and this field in particular. And then they'll come to us and say, oh, will this help mitigate it? Will this? And so we hope that money, somehow we could take it from the large studios and large media conglomerates, so that way it can be used back into this field. Because things like that existed, right, with PEG cable access television. So we're just in a new moment where we need to rebuild and provide that input, because if that input's not there, it's not going to happen. They think Netflix is good, people back in DC, because they're like, well, Netflix, it's like the king of everything, right? So it's great.
And we don't want to say that it's all bad.
Exactly, that's the thing. Of course, we all use okay, but we're not anti Netflix. It's just they need to know that this field is in the marketplace is hard, and this is the supply chain for that field. And Netflix should not be taking all of your IP. You should be making a living doing your work, not being just fully extracted from it. So I think all of that is just education of how this field works and what it does and what we need. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I just hope, I come from an organizational perspective, just please engage, let's iterate ideas so hope can be constructed, right? I mean, I think that's the most important thing, is like, what can we build and work towards that's aspirational? I think there's a lot of opportunity, and we have to, we've made our piece to do it with less money, do it better way. But that being said, I think what Loira brings up is like this. It hasn't totally worked, but there's this moment could rebuild things in a way that could sort of wash away what was really bad. So yeah,
I think it's important where you have some power to exercise it, and that can happen in a lot of different ways. You can require who's on your crew. You can give somebody a job. You can say, I want to spend part of my budget to do this for this community. You can do what Geeta Ganbir did. She got a big Netflix sale. She gave that money to her subjects. So not everybody's in a position to do that, but she said she was going to do it, and she did it. So there are times when you have power, recognize it. It doesn't always, it looks different for people. maybe you're resourced in a job and somebody has nothing, and you can let them shadow you, so they can say that they were on a set and they can then get a job. You know, like, think about power differently, and how you can share.
I would say that the one thing that I hope that we can really hold on to is just how sacred and powerful and radical the work that we do is as storytellers, and that nonfiction film is an essential part of a healthy narrative and arts ecosystem. What we do literally changes people's minds, beliefs, ideas. It's the work of building culture, right? And culture is the space where you lay the seeds for social and political change to become possible. And so as, you know, there's so much tumult and turmoil, and the people that are going to be the most impacted are going to be the artists and the audiences, that we hold on to our belief in the power and importance of the work that we do, and that we have clarity of purpose. Why are we really doing this? Because if you're not clear on that, at a moment like this, you're probably not going to be able to stay in the space, and that we organize and we take some risks. Figure out, everybody has a different risk to take. I'm not saying we all have to do the same thing, but let's take some risks. Let's get out of our comfort zones.
Yeah, I'm into that. And I'm going to take a question, and we'll start with the head of IDA, but I just want to close on my thought, which is, when you talk about, Jax, about having Netflix return IP, I mean, Warner Brothers did that, right, with respect to Sinners. And obviously we know that director's at a super high level. But I think if the creative community coalesced around certain things, just like Film Collaborative created a real thing, like, you have to be more transparent. Not everyone signed on to that, but we do have the power when we work together to affect change, because they have to work with somebody. And if people refuse to work in a certain way that's not sustainable or not, you know, right, that's not gonna work. So with that, Dominic from IDEA, you have a question? Yes, Mike.
First of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate all your words and thoughts, and how much all over again you make me proud to be a collaborator of all of you at different times in different ways. The thing I was just going to add perhaps was, it seems like so much of this is about how to think short-term and long-term at the same time. Policy blueprint is obviously long-term, and, you know, we're here to work together on that and find out what that could be. Short-term, something that's a little bit under-considered is litigation. You know, there are ways, which is also about policy. It's about getting the rights, securing the rights that we already have. We've launched a lawsuit against the State Department in recent times to block the rules that require visa applicants to disclose social media channels. But to be able to be successful in that as a field, you need to have legal standing. You need to have members. You need to show, as you are doing with we are both doing with Block the Merger, that your members are affected by this. So, and we have a partnership with the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University, pro bono support there. So I think litigation is something we all want to consider. And then just one last thing, Loira, and anybody to go back to your first remarks about how filmmakers are in danger, are in physical danger all the time. We got some support recently to launch an emergency assistance fund based on the program that the Committee to Protect Journalists have. We're going to launch that as a pilot next month, but I really want everybody's help to understand how that can best be implemented and then sustained, but we'll talk about that.
That's amazing. Thank you. I think we have time for what? Would you say one more question? Okay, perfect. That's you.
Hi, thank you so much for this conversation. So I'm a DC-based communicator. My background is in advocacy, nonprofit. I worked on the Hill for people on both sides of the aisle. My question is really, like, I'm going to assume I'm not the only DC-based person or communicator in the room. So, like, how can we help you with more of this narrative storytelling, earned media, thought leadership? What do you need?
I will definitely start. I think once upon a time, you know, we would be really in community and collaboration with members. And I know that you all are, well, members in particular are under assault, but those screenings are really powerful. So I did a film, Gideon's Army, about 3 young public defenders. After that film, Eric Holder was the Attorney General at the time. He did the first grant to indigent defense from the federal government. So having your members understand what is happening to us where they have these quiet opportunities to reinstate. We are realistic. We do not expect, puppies and lollipops all the time. We're saying, like, there are concrete things that you can do that will protect our livelihood and our ability to be safe and to be employed. Because right now, people are afraid to speak, they are afraid to challenge, and they're looking to people who they perceive as powerful. So we need that. We need people to be reaching out and having these conversations about what our day-to-day is actually like. I am completely distraught that it is only really citizen journalists that I'm hearing from about Minnesota. We would not have those videos if it wasn't for people literally risking their lives. That is unacceptable in the United States of America, that every journalist is not on the ground in Minnesota. That is ridiculousness.
We need people like you talking to us at Future Film Coalition too. So I mean, I think one of the main things that this independent film field needs is people like you who can help shape how we talk to policymakers and develop those relationships. It's come up time and time again over the 10 years that I was at the NEA. People are afraid of policymakers. They don't know what they want to say. But then also, like, we just need help with messaging, right? And how do we message as a field in a way that communicates to people who are in these positions of power, who can do the work quietly to help, because we know it can be done, because we've seen a lot of great examples and great models, and I'm really excited for the local journalism, the local news, and the public media and the independent film sectors to be coming together for these conversations, because we need to work as one right now. So what is your name?
Danielle Vieira.
All right, and we also have street.
I'll come down and find you.
Please do. We have street team packs for Future Film Coalition, so if anybody wants to be part of the Future Film Coalition street team, go over there and talk to Gray with the colorful sweater on and the glasses. Yes, thank you.
Any last words before I read my outro? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all. You were amazing. I really, really appreciate it. And there's never enough time for these conversations, but so thanks again for joining this session at Solidarity House, which is organized by a coalition of over 50 movement builders within and surrounding the independent film community. We invite you to hold close a reminder that Solidarity House infrastructure means recognizing that our organizations are stronger when we share knowledge, pool resources, and coordinate strategy across the ecosystem, which is just what we've been talking about today. So as we exit, please introduce yourself to 2 new people and share 2 things. First, share your most urgent yet accomplishable dream, and second, a challenge you are currently facing. Make 1 ask and 1 offer of support, but resist the urge to be transactional. Ask for something from one person, offer something to the next, and trust that in solidarity, the community is caring for all. Please check out the schedule of remaining events by scanning the QR codes around the room at solidarityhouse.com. Let's stay connected and continue to build. Thank you so much. Thank you guys. Thank you.